this is kind of what I've been dealing with, why this has been, this project's been taking so long as far as the fiberglass, because I don't have a way to put it inside, and I have to put it under this tent, which is 13 feet, so obviously the boat doesn't fit all the way underneath it. So what I end up having to do is put a heavy-duty ground tarp on the back end, prop it up really steep in the front end, and I just tuck the front end underneath it and let the last little bit of the back end hang out the back.
Welcome back to the off cycle. It's another blistering day here in Jacksonville, Florida. As you can see, I've got an empty trailer behind me, which means I've got the hull dumped off the trailer upside down. And today is the day we start processing the bottom of the hull, getting all the bottom paint off and everything, preparing the bottom half of the hull for new paint. It's not going to get bottom paint on it. It doesn't stay in the water. To this day, I don't understand why people put bottom paint on boats that go on trailers, but the bottom paint is coming off, and it's going to be a decent amount of work. It's got it looks like it had bottom paint on it, and then it was painted white, and then bottom paint reapplied. So it has like bottom paint and then another layer of regular like topside paint, and then it has like another layer of bottom paint underneath that, and then the original green gel coat. So now sanding the bottom, I can see that green underneath that's on the transom, that's definitely the original gel coat. It's actually quite thick up around the nose and the V of the bow, and it's on there thick. I am trying to use some paint stripper. I use paint stripper on the bottom paint on my sailboat, which made things a lot easier. I actually thinned it out and sprayed it with a spray gun. But the problem is today it is so hot out, and right in the sun, as soon as I put that paint stripper on there, it just evaporates and hardens. It doesn't have any time to seep in and weaken that paint. So I'm trying to put it on, throw a trash bag over it to keep it a little bit wet. But while I'm waiting on that, I'm just sanding the sides as best I can, sand that transition down, get that kind of smooth. But I may end up having to just wait till this evening after the sun goes down and dump a bunch of paint stripper on there, let it work, and then I usually just hit it with a pressure washer to wash it off. But we're gonna get back to sanding and let that paint stripper underneath the trash bag sit, and then I'll hit it with a pressure washer in about a half an hour and see if it's done any better. So you could see the original green gel coat here. It looks like a thick stripe and then a thin stripe underneath. It looks like this boat used to have some vinyl striping on it. It's crazy that you can tell where the paint is stuck more or better even after all these years underneath these layers of paint. But you can see the blue paint on top of the white, and then underneath the white is darker blue and then green. So you get green, blue, white, and then blue on top of it. The bottom paint that's on top of the white is pretty thin. It's coming off fairly easy, but the white paint itself is pretty tough stuff. It's not coming off super easy. And then the bottom paint underneath that is actually it's on there pretty thick, and it's pretty stuck. So you're really not supposed to do any kind of like top coat paint over a bottom ablative paint, but that's what somebody did, and kind of surprised it stuck as well as it did. But it's coming off, but slowly but surely. All right, we've made some progress. I've got all of the bottom paint and everything, all the paint down to the gel coat off the sides of the boat. Sander made fairly quick work of it. I would still like the assistance of the paint remover for the whole bottom. That would greatly help out, but if this doesn't work, then I'm probably gonna go ahead and just continue on with sanding the bottom rather than wait for evening to put the paint stripper on there and hope that it can set in a little bit better without the sun beating on it. But I'm about to pull this off and see how it goes. It looks pretty much just dried on there. really doesn't look like any of that paint bubbled up. It just, that stripper just gets rock hard when it's in the sun like that. It might soften the paint, but then it just dries out and the paint hardens. So I'll hit it with the pressure washer real quick before I take a break. That way if it doesn't come off, it has some time to dry so I can go ahead and start sanding it. But the only bad part about this is sometimes this will soften the paint so much, or just enough for it not to come off, but then it'll just start clogging sandpaper. So using this paint stripper stuff is always kind of a risk. Well, that did about as much as I thought it would, which is absolutely nothing. None of it really came off. It did the first time I put it on there and actually sprayed it with a little bit of water just to kind of keep it wet initially. Some of it did come off and some of it I scraped, but most of this stuff is just smeared around paint that was on the brush with the stripper. It took off a very, very thin coat, but it's really doing nothing to take all the paint off. But hopefully it's thinned it a little bit. If it didn't take it all the way off, hopefully it's thinned it out, and maybe once it dries, it's possible it could be even harder. If it sits here and bakes, it could be harder, so that would make it easier to sand off, but only time will tell. I'll take a quick break right now, cool off, and we'll come back out in about a half an hour once this is dry and dry sanding on it and see what we get. Just to give you guys an idea of the heat that's going on here, it's definitely like 100% humidity. It's gross. Like the grass is still wet from the morning, and you know, sun's been up for several hours. I think it's close to noon now, but the grass is still damp from the dew from at night. But just the top deck of this boat right here is almost 147 degrees. Let's go see what the hull is. Granted, I just sprayed this about 3 minutes ago. It's already pretty much bone dry after a couple minutes, but it's 134 degrees, 33 degrees. So it's brutally hot out here. All right, for the other side of the hull, covered in blue, but the other side of the hull, I think I finally got the paint stripper working. The sun has gone behind the clouds, so it's not drying out. I'm having to keep slathering it on to keep it wet, but I think I've kept it wet enough for it to work and loosen the paint. So I'm about to hit it with the pressure washer and see if it'll knock off.